working at zoos is a good career choice for somebody who has a degree in biology. So I want to tell you a little bit about curators, which are the people who actually manage the collections of animals at the zoo. But, and also in doing so, I wanted to give you a little background into the history of the Bronx Zoo, because the Bronx Zoo is really a neat institution. It's got a lot of history, and it's certainly one of the most famous and prominent zoos in the world. So hopefully I'll give you a little background about the Bronx Zoo and something about curators and how curators function and how important they are to the whole process, and then take some questions in the end if there are any. And I will try to be respectful and stick within the 50 minutes. So, living institutions. What are the living institutions? Well, we're always trying to figure out what we're going to call a zoo. So the living institutions in New York are the Bronx Zoo, the Central Park Zoo, Queens Zoo, Prospect Park Zoo, and the River Zoo. Okay? The Bronx Zoo is the biggest of all those. It's 265 acres in the middle of the Bronx. And together, we get about 2.1 million visitors a year. And all the institutions together, we get about 4 million people a year. So that's 4 million people that we get to introduce to animals, the concepts in conservation and the importance of animals in the environment and saving the environment. So we have a large audience, captive audience that we can preach to. The curatorial staff that I mentioned, they're made up of people with degrees in science. 75% of them have PhDs, and almost 60% of them do field research. One of the best models for modern curator that we have, his name is John Bailey. He's actually a graduate from ESU. He got his master's degree from this school. We'll talk a little bit more about him last year, but later in the program. But you have to remember that the zoos have evolved just from menageries where people just kept animals into these scientific institutions where a lot of research is done. In order to do some of our mission work, we have to make the zoos and the living institutions attractive for people to come. People have to come, they want to see animals, they want to learn about animals. So how do we do that? We do that by designing these really dynamic, interactive exhibits where you can come to the zoo and learn about animals and the environment by just walking around and seeing the animals in their habitat. What we try to do in all of our facilities right now is not just build random exhibits with random animals and say, oh, it would be nice to display these animals. We try to link animals and exhibits that we display in our parks with serious field work that WCS, which is the Wildlife Conservation Society, that's the parent organization that runs the Bronx Zoo and the other zoos. So these exhibits will align with work that we're doing in the field. Now, the Bronx Zoo, as I said, has a great history. It's one of the first zoos that had a full-time animal hospital or wildlife health center. And we did that in the early 1900s. And today, with those 5 parks, the veterinarians that we have, they care for over 19,000 animals of 1,300 species. Now think about that. A human physician works on 2 models, right, male and female. But a veterinarian has to work on all these different models of animals from all these different classes. So they have to know an awful lot of what they're doing. It's much more difficult in some ways. Aside from the animal care, we have library and archival service, securities, everything that we have to provide for the admissions, the rides, and operations for all the parks. We have our own kind of little village where we have our carpenter shops and machine shops and paint shops and our garage. And also at the Bronx Zoo, you might be surprised to know that we have our own electrical plant. So we generate our own electricity in the Bronx Zoo to operate the Bronx Zoo, and actually we make a surplus amount that we can export back to Con Edison. And here's something that actually I started, Dr. Massa said I started in the Children's Zoo and also at the camel rides. This is one of our most important programs at the Bronx Zoo, is an education program where we have program animals. And what that does is allow people to get up close and personal with animals. And it's that kind of connection that they can make with an animal in an intimate setting that makes people really want to care about the animal, really make them kind of empathetic and join in to help save our mission. So that's my wife, Kathleen. That's there. She runs that program and some animals and some people that have participated in it over the years. And also the education program. We've actually started this school with a local public school, which is called the Urban Assembly School for Wildlife Conservation. And what that will eventually do is, it's an entire grade school that will focus on conservation. And conservation will be a key in all their science courses. And we started, I think, just with the 6th and 7th grade, but eventually, as it fleshes out, the entire school will follow the content of those curriculums. And then, go back to animal collection. Right now, our animal collection has grown kind of outside the place that we can house it. So we've just raised money to create this new $8 million building for our attractable animal program. So all our program animals, all the animals that we use in teaching, will be housed in this new facility. That's the other thing I'll get into later too. When I talk about $8 million, it's extremely difficult to do anything in New York City, any kind of construction, any kind of renovation for a little amount of money. So everything costs an incredible amount of money. And if you look at the map on the screen up there, you'll see the 5 wildlife centers where they are. They're all in the center of New York. So when we do anything, we have to deal with the trade unions and the cost of working and operating in New York. And that puts an extra burden on our fundraising and development operation. So the whole purpose of doing this, why do we do this? We want to connect people to animals. We want to connect people to wildlife. We want to connect people and make them care. We want them to be empathetic. We want them to say, well, these animals, this land, this wild land is worth saving. And we do that by creating the type of exhibits that we do, where we hopefully inspire them to care. And the zoos are like kind of the gateway to conservation, because we can transport people to places that the average person is never going to be able to go. You can come to the Bronx Zoo and visit a couple of continents in an afternoon, okay, and maybe it will excite you and inspire you to go and actually visit those places, the real places in the wild. But if you can't do it, you can still get a little glimpse of what we're trying to save and hopefully join with us in the mission to do it and realize the importance of us saving it. So where did it all start? Before we had the Bronx Zoo, we had the Central Park Menagerie. And this is still the Arsenal building. It still stands there. All those elephants didn't really live there. There must have been a circus in town, so they just brought them over there so they could rest. I just like the photograph. So that's the Arsenal that's covered with ivory. Ivory. Slip of the tongue. The people that wanted to start the Bronx Zoo thought that New York was something better than the Central Park Menagerie. They said, New York's the greatest city in the world. We have the greatest zoological park in the world. So the trustees and the people who got together to get this charter from the state for the New York Zoological Park, they wanted to create this area that we would have a wide expanse of land where we could exhibit animals in natural habitat. And the person that they hired to do it was this guy, William Hornaday. He was the first director of the zoo. And it might surprise you that a lot of the original founders and the first director, they were all avid hunters and sportsmen. Okay? So conservation was seen as hand in hand with sportsmanship and hunting. Why? Because they wanted to guarantee that there would be animals and resources left for generations to come. So it might conflict a little bit with what you think of conservation today, but in the early years, they went hand in hand. Hornaday went to a couple of places in the Bronx. He went to Van Cortlandt Park, he went to Pelham Bay Park, and he went to the Bronx Park. And he picked the Bronx Park. And that's his quote about the Bronx Zoo, the land that would become the Bronx Zoo. He picked it because of the topography. And as he went through the park, and he saw the river, the Bronx River that comes through, he saw the natural rock work that goes through this glacial gneiss, called Florida gneiss, which is rocks that were deposited by the glaciers as they moved through. It all just, he could just look at it and he could imagine creating these living dioramas where animals could live and be seen by people who come to the zoo. So after a couple of years, the charter was received in 1895 and the zoo opened in 1899. And it looked very different than it does today. Those were the old bear exhibits, the reptile house, which again, if you've been there recently, it's very different than that. Astor Court, the elephant house, the lion house, and again, I just put that picture of the snow leopard in there because you see the way the cats were displayed back then and the way we would do it today. But Hornaday didn't do it all by himself. These were the early curators, and that's the people that he hired to help him get the Bronx Zoo started and to arrange for the first animal collections in the park. And Ray Ditmars was actually a newspaper reporter that Hornaday hired because Ditmars had a large collection of private collection of reptiles that he brought and donated to the zoo when Hornaday hired him. And you can see that he wrote many books. Those are two of them that I have listed there. But he wrote a lot of books about reptiles for a popular audience that would help improve the way people thought about reptiles. Because a lot of times reptiles were and are still, unfortunately, reviled. Another one is Lee Crandall. He was the zoo's first general curator and a curator of mammals. He wrote the book Wild Mammals in Captivity. That book today is still a useful resource. And of course, Beebe. Some of you may have heard about Beebe. He was the zoo's first curator of birds, but he also was big into conservation and ocean exploration. He found that he was kind of the first curator that had a foot in both worlds, in the zoo world and in the field. He did a lot of field research. But the new era for the Bronx Zoo really happened in 1956 when Bill Conway came on as curator of birds and then shortly became the director. And he was the guy that really changed the zoo profession, not just the look of the Bronx Zoo, but changed the zoo profession throughout the country and throughout the world. He's probably the most influential figure in the zoo profession. And he just retired from the Bronx in 1999. But he was somebody who really felt that curators needed to get out in the field and not only work with animals in a captive situation, but go out and do studies and do research and protect and save environments for animals to live in the wild. But there's really no sense to having zoos if the true purpose or the true mission of the zoo is not to lead to conservation and saving wild animals and wild places. First thing that Conway did, you look at that smaller picture there in 1899, that's the old aquatic birdhouse. That's the way flamingos used to be exhibited. If you look at 64, he changed it to that. And similarly with the old birdhouse and the New World of Birds. He kind of changed the whole concept for a zoo exhibit. The World of Birds was the Bronx Zoo's first immersion exhibit, and I dare say probably one of the zoo world's first immersion exhibit. And since then they've become very common. So what do these immersion exhibits do for us? They change the way zoos think. Zoos used to have like postage stamps collection of animals because directors and curators would go out and they would collect interesting animals and they would display them one or two together, right? And just like this poor duck-billed platypus. Hornaday, the first director of the zoo, this is probably, if you asked him, he would probably consider this his greatest professional achievement, that he was able to get duck-billed platypuses from Australia and exhibit them in the Bronx. This is a man who almost single-handedly saved American bison from extinction. He worked to save first trade, and also worked with the fashion industry to stop the huge taking of birds, water birds like egrets for the plume trade, fashion trade with women's hats. But because of the time he lived and the way they looked, if you asked him what his greatest accomplishment was, it would probably be being able to exhibit a duck-billed platypus. But what the new exhibits that Conway envisioned and just kind of inspired from then on was not exhibiting just an animal, but a slice of habitat. So you're not going to see zoo exhibits really that exhibit a certain animal. You're going to see them exhibit a habitat and all the animals that live in that habitat with their conspecifics and with different species that they interact with. And Jungle World, I was just talking to Dr. Master, Jungle World, he said, is his favorite zoo exhibit. It's still probably my favorite zoo exhibit, and it's 31 years old. And it's probably the best